I just want to take this time to mention, contrary to what people may think, we hear about these ex-retired military guys, rolling in dough. Richard is one of these guys that is working day by day, doing workshops and teaching, doing research projects and so forth, and the sale of his books. And it's important that if you do enjoy these talks that Richard gives, which are, free and out of his joy of sharing information, that you do follow up perhaps with some of the written published publications. And I want to mention he does have a new GoFundMe. Well, it's actually not new. New to me. It shows how quiet Richard is about a lot of these things. GoFundMe.com, Richard Allen Miller, one word. I have the links on the front page where he is, by contributing there, you're helping him to release a lot of his books that he has from the early days. In fact, he was showing me some manuscripts from the days of the SEAL Corporation when he was starting with the SEALs, that you're going to get, with these publications, we're getting actually real-time history by someone who was there at the beginning. And these are things that are written already, not necessarily the fond reminiscence of the past, but the past carried in through the present. And so it's important, I think, that people go to the GoFundMe.com, Richard Allen Miller. Again, links are on the front of my page to do that. You also have DocRam.com, Oak-Publishing.com, HerbFarmInfo.com. But if you just simply do a search for Richard Allen Miller books and whatnot, you will find that as well. So let's bring back now Richard Allen Miller. Welcome back to the show.
There, my mic's back on.
There we go.
I was bumping like an old man with my mouse. Sorry about that.
No.
I make a lot of noise, so I turn the sound off usually when you're...
Yeah, I got a button I do here. The trouble is this can't see it on the cameras here, but this a mixer is seen many better days. It was not a real expensive, but I had a really nice big recording mixing board from the 80s, but it just died.
I know.
So I had to buy
old bikes. Away.
Yeah, but I do have a nice Allen and Heath board that I bought, and I still haven't installed it in here yet. So I'm my own worst enemy, I guess, with this stuff. I've learned that years ago when I was talking about astrology, we were talking about this earlier on the phone. An astrologer did a chart on me, looking at my Mars being having a bunch of Aries Sun, Aries Rising, Aries Venus, Aries Mercury. My Mars, which rules Aries, is in the Gemini. So the guy looks at me and goes, "Oh, I bet you got all kinds of projects that are started and never finished." I didn't know this guy from Adam. He didn't know who I was. And I'm going like, boy, there obviously some...
Schizophrenia. That's what we're calling it now.
Yeah, that's funny. And I went to
going different directions with your energy.
Because when I first started studying all this stuff, I went to a palm reader, and they read my palm, and they said, well, it's obvious from this palm. She's showing me these lines, which I don't know nothing. She says, well, either you're a genius or insane, and we know which one that is. And I go, I don't know if I'm sure. You want to give me a little hint? So it was kind of fascinating going into those things. But of course, it's been abused and by charlatans and whatnot. So like anything, like everything, So, but with this, with all of this stuff flying around now, I got all these projects that are not finished, and I don't, I don't know if I even will finish them.
They've written that book. It's called Paths Not Taken. A little less roads less traveled.
I actually read that book.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, time. We're talking in this segment. We did a whole big Nibiru thing, which will be released separately. And this particular segment, hour, we're going to be talking about the nature and structure of time. Is time linear, cylindrical, multiple lines? Can it be traveled? Can the past be literally changed? And so forth. And we talked a little bit today about this, but on the phone or Skype, just chatting. And so we have to kind of rewind a bit and look into time. We think time is linear. We're born and we die. But how erroneous is that in reality?
Well, it's a nice graffiti in some of the lavatories here. We have, there's no such thing as gravity. The earth sucks. That's the same thing. Time is a duration of consciousness. That's the way Robert Ornstein put it. Now, that's psychology. That means it is the way you store memory. You group an event like the radio show from 8 to 9 o'clock. It's got a segmented beginning and end and a middle part. That's a beginning and an end and a middle part. There's three parts to the equation. So it is the way you capture the moment. Let's use water and the concepts of memory and water as a metaphor. So you have a drop of solid water that falls into a pool. What happens next is that there are three things that happen. The first is the water hit the bubble, the drop of water hits the pool of water, and it seemingly bounces back up again as another ball of water. It's not. It's a ball of air and captured by some very strange water. And what else happens is a wave goes outward toward the shoreline, and that's called the future as a secondary wave. The wave that goes inward slaps and creates in the slapping, it creates exclusion zone water, a very thin layer of water, like a bubble, a soap bubble, that captures air. And that's called a cavitation ball. And the inward form of time is your past. Now, the past is the now in the moment of how long that sacred time happened. That means that if the drop of water hit the pool as a large drop of water, then the waves are separated one to the next in the way they go radiate outward. They're also higher in amplitude and some other things. We will call that phenomena timelines. And so what the water is actually doing is it's breaking down into something much more special with information on the way the drop hit the pool that was sitting there as potential, and the drop is the thought form or the idea or basically your moment of sacred time to be distinguished from the profane. And what happens, when you're lovemaking, that could last from a clock form as long as an hour. You could be 10 minutes usually for me, but it doesn't last very long. But that concept is how you form a cavitation with your past and its relationship to the future. Now, the metaphor that's happening with me right now that I've started 45 years after having advanced forms of biofeedback and martial art training and all of the disciplines that I've had, I've started exploring some new areas of consciousness without drugs using my own neurotransmitters. And I have encountered something remarkable. It is as if my future is dictating to me at this moment what I need to be doing that will literally change my past. And the example of that I'm going to use is that at the time I was doing something in the past, SEAL Corporation, Navy SEALs didn't exist. And what I was talking about, I thought was a seal on a jar and had absolutely nothing to do with anything but me training a bunch of spooks on how to control autonomic functions. Now, that has led later now to what we call Navy SEALs and all the mystique associated with that. But at the moment I did it, it wasn't Navy SEALs. And yet, because of what I'm doing right now at this moment in sacred time, dealing with my future as a specific timeline, I control the drop's fall, the volume of the drop, and therein changing the movie. This is the key on how to do it.
All right, let me stop right there and put something in here on it. So now, are you changing what happened, or when you go back, say you can rewind back in the past to watch it, all right, so you're walking, and because of training that you had worked on in the future, which worked in the past, you avoided what would have happened because of what you did in the future. So in your actual past, you avoided an issue because you worked on something in the future. It went back and changed it before it happened.
The ball that pops back up as a secondary drop of water that will again hit the thing is not a drop of water. It's actually a cavitation ball where the air or medium that it trapped, in this case air, is cavitating as a topological surface. It's a toroid. And I'm going to suggest that this brown dwarf star and our sun has a orbit that would be one planet going around one sun and then the other in an 8, forming an 8. And that is going to be different than the planet that we're talking about right now, which is probably the brown dwarf. And it's a cavitation ball where you have a doubleganger. That doubleganger could metaphorically be seen as your higher self, the other 9/10 of your cerebral cortex, your holy guardian angel, the other part of not I, part of self that you're in dialogue with or should be striving toward now. And you do that by a number of different protocols. Diaries are a good way to do it because everybody is unique, like star systems. We're all different. And that means there's not, fourth genome, rhesus negative, and blood types. It's like each of us are a habitat with brown dwarf stars in our system. That means I have more candida in my armpits and they smell if I eat sugar, that kind of thing. You are whom you feed. It's like you're 10% human and the rest of you is other organisms in symbiosis as a life form entity conglomerate. And so your consciousness has many scales like a dog. The reason, and as good as it gets, when Jack Nicholson, the kid came up to Jack Nicholson, he said, why does my dog love you more than I do? Then he loves me. And Nicholson said, I feed him bacon. The dog thinks with its gut. And so you know how to communicate to certain parts of your body by the kinds of foods and pleasures or gifts that you give yourself. Chocolate cures everything, by the way. So with that said, there's all kinds of things that you could be doing in terms of aspiring toward awareness. And consciousness in itself is a rather incomplete dream that is mostly nightmarish with karma. In other words, at the end of the day, you have what you're going to do at the end of the day is your intent. That is what is called intent. And intentionality is when you don't quite get there, miss it by that much. And what you've got to do, you can go do that at the end of the day, either kicking and screaming or flowing like Buddha, where the mountain came to him. You have that choice of doing it.
All right. Well,
now,
so how do you make that? How does that choice come about? I mean, how do you do that choice? You're saying you have a choice. You sit down and go, I want the mountain to come to me, or, that's...
Yeah, well, okay, let's say the police are locking, it's Black Friday, and you've been fighting over a thing with somebody else, and they're putting handcuffs on you. I saw one person that absolutely refused to let go of a $15 item from China while she was being handcuffed. That's like crazy. You have to have enough sense to know what it is you really want to do. And then that's the difference between flowing and karma, where you're ricocheting across the walls. You're still going to have to go down the hall. It's going to, end of days. It's going to happen. Now, you have choices on how you approach that. And that's where you select a future timeline. Quote, everything happens for a reason. Everything leads to something better. And once you have the mandate of how you're choosing to accept reality, then things fall into place. And synchronicity is what you find significance in. That's how your angel and your higher self will talk to yourself, and that's how you form dialogue. what you find significant over what you find is irrelevant. And everybody's different.
No, right. And what you're saying here absolutely did not anywhere come close to my question. However, what it did do, this is important, I think, for everybody to realize this. What I have learned in the past is everything happens for a reason. So what you just said at that moment is something I needed to hear. I haven't fully comprehended it and applied it in my life, and I'm gonna be pondering on that. But rather than
George, I think he's got it. The rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain. You've got it. It's your mind's eye. It's not my words. It's not my thought. It's your mind's eye, and what you dictate is important to hear. And once you've got that part, you now have started the journey. So that's what it's all about, the journey.
Well, what I have done in the past would be to wrestle back to what I originally wanted to know, and I've learned it by being beaten, metaphorically and otherwise.
Yeah, really.
And so, I mean, this I brought this up purposely because there's a little thing that just, there's a little thing. The way I figure, the most important things we learn are the stuff that happens in the corner of your eye. It's not the stuff you're focusing on. It's the stuff all around it, and you would think it'd be the other way around. So, like, for example, me doing the show, I learned that me doing the show was not about me putting together a radio show and going on network radio and doing it for a living. That wasn't it. The peripheral things that I needed to learn come from doing the show. I'm not doing the show. The show is facilitating my learning. And so rather...
There you go. That's the place where you call it flowing rather than fighting the system. If you're going to fight your system, I'd usually use that energy to wash a floor. Well, no, you get a really good clean on the floor when you're really pissed off in. And, that's how you use that energy, and you don't take it personally. You absorb it as a tool.
Now, let me go back, though, at this point to that question, is because I'm trying to understand the actual impact of a person living in space-time who is in the future affecting the past. Okay, so, for example, let's say I did something in the past, an event happened, did or didn't do, whatever. Now, in the future, I somehow changed that event. Will my memory now still remember that event, but the evidence around it in the physical plane won't support that? I go, gee, I thought I did that. I guess I didn't. Or would you now have the new event would become your current memory?
My stock response would be yes. All of the above.
Well, okay.
And that's the truth of that. That's the truth of all of that, because both thought forms are in it.
Yeah, now of course, and I did what I don't like is
specifically forbidden is mandatory. It's your mind. That's what's real. Imagination, and all the rest of it is putty. It's putty to be manipulated as you choose, and you go to a different place in the brain, and you see a different reality. I usually use the number 8 flat iron skillet. That works pretty good for me.
Well, no, what I did was I boxed you into a corner with giving an either or, which I don't like. I don't like having that done to me, and I did it to you, and then you simply walked through it without having to be constrained by it, which was done very gracefully.
Well, it's a part of information theory says this is a very important theorem. If you have enough information to ask a coherent question, you have enough information to answer it. And that's what Cliff High and his web bots are doing, is using algorithms in terms of manipulating what has been measured to create the future. Now, was the future already there, or did he create it? Timelines, and taking singularities and collapsing them down or out. Now, in quantum mechanics, they use quantum foam. In string theory, what they are now using is knots. This is a plasma which has a sheath that you would then tie into a bowline, route it this way. And then when you pull on it, it squeezes in certain ways and creating, ripples because of the way the bowline knot would pull together without mixing itself like a string. That's why they call it string theory. This is two ways of looking at the universe. The one over here does it with time. And you have singularities, and it has to do with the cavitation process that you've trapped the medium that you're putting it in with the thought form. And that's where we're going to, next century, have a hollow earth, literal. We're into the out of. Alan D. Foster. That's a really good book to read.
Oh, see, and on one hand, we're talking about, Planet X and all the devastation, and then you go talking about the next century and the next 2 centuries and everything. I mean, Well,
we'll have continuum. There will be blood. There is no question about that movie. In fact, that is the agenda as the prime directive, because there's so many people on the earth. Get a grip. Can't control all those laptops out there in the Borg way of Borg's bots and, the advanced humans.
But that would be what the entities controlling here want to do.
Kennedy?
Yeah. As opposed,
That's an interesting
well, I mean, as opposed to the advancement of humankind is not to deplete the population. It's the people wanting to control the growing population who want to deplete.
Oh yeah, Soylent Green. Well, good luck with that.
Well, no, I mean, what's important here is like if people on this planet treated each other like human beings, and take your choice of any of the teachers who talk about loving one another. Take your choice. If we followed their teachings, we could have triple the population. It doesn't matter, because it's the inequity of resources which causes trouble, not the number of people.
Lemegaton, the fallen angels, the greed, lust, jealousy, rage. Yeah, the deadly sins, demons. Well, these are the qualities that are in humans that we deem unworthy in terms of being faulted from our design right out of the gate. That was the whole Christian tenet, that man is by nature unworthy. And that why we became God's favored was that we were given choice. Constantine and some of the other movies have always tried to include that metaphor that there's something more going on here, that the war is actually within oneself, that if you wanted to actually have an alien presence, you could look at the blood type, the fourth genome in your blood type, and there's your alien, and the war for Earth is going on inside each of us. And you could say it's all about choice, and you're getting, complacent, and getting up off the couch with your Doritos, putting them down and starting the work. That's the deal. And actually, all of us know exactly what I just said. And so from that point of view, that is the archetypal part of, I can't get out of here until you finish doing what you're supposed to be doing. So we're in a hurry, and I'm being impatient. Like trying to, boost someone else with the idea that it's time for you to start walking. Because while you're not going to save this earth, your children are watching you. And that's how they learn how to be pedophiles, gamblers, and drug addicts. They see how you did it. That's how it works. It's a mini-me, reincarnation. The fact that now my daughter is a mix of my ex-wife and I, that kind of thing.
All right, now back to one of my theories that I have. And so I'll stuff will pop in my head. And I don't know where it comes from. I mean, meaning that it's not something that I calculated in my head and figured out. But I'll say, and I'll ponder it. I call it pondering, where I kind of just let it bounce around and stuff happens, right? And the reason why I'm interested in this changing the past and the present is that this is probably metaphorical in how I'm going to say the mechanics of it, but we're all living multiple timeline lives simultaneously.
Yes.
And it's like we normally would go to school first to ninth grade. I think in reality in the world is we're going to school at kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, ninth, college, all at once, like this. We're all doing this. And some of that stuff bleeds through these parallel timelines, but eventually the goal is to, let's say, complete your degree, all right? But what happens along the way is that you mess up here, but over here you learn something, so you go back and change the past. And so eventually when this is all done, when you get to that end, you're all on the same page, you're all together, and you've finished your task. And so you have all of these things running simultaneously, let's call it parallel, and information is bouncing in between it, so that instead of going from point A to point B, you go from point A to point B, but in the process, you're actually going back and forth and in and out and all this stuff, getting it all lined up until you're all on the same page, and then you get to point B.
Well, that's what your dreaming and altered states are about. That's where you go to places you can't go in conscious states. That's why you do it.
And I'm not even saying that all these levels are all me on Earth in the realm here now. It could be other lives. It could be other places. But the goal, there's like, I know I'm being linear, but if there's linear goals along the way of consciousness, and you're in this mix, and you get to a vortex point, and then you go through the birth canal into the next thing, and so that the bottom line is that everybody will go through that eventually, and it's all good. You know, I mean,
well, yeah, there's a movie that I watched. You know, I've mentioned it before in other locations, maybe you or not, called Astral City. It's in Portuguese. It's on Hulu. You can watch it. It's about a doctor that watches himself from an astral place. He watches himself die on the operating table. And at the moment of his death, what happens next? Astral City, Hulu. Enjoy. Basically, we're all time travelers. We have amnesia. We're here in the physical plane to be sick spiritually. And once you wake up, like I told my daughter, now you have access to what Interstellar was like. You remember the movie Interstellar?
Oh, yeah. Very good.
And
I liked it.
Movie, yeah, he's in the hall, what do they call it? The Akashic Records. It's a big library, timelines moving all different ways. Well done representation visually of how it would work. And what he did is, because he had the knowledge that his daughter was not afraid of the books popping out as a paranormal thing with spooky ghosts, that it was someone trying to communicate something to him. And so he took that metaphor and started pushing books out in the future in the timeline or black hole, the cavitation ball.
Actually,
he was at the other end as a metaphor. That is how time works, and how your higher self is communicating to your consciousness, which is ill spiritually.
And you notice in that movie, you have physical limitations in that for him to go back in this timeline, let's call it, his daughter was near death of old age, and he made it back like just in time. But there were these physical. I tell you, when I saw that movie, the thing that really hit home is when they went down on that one planet that was really close to a black hole, and so the time dilation was there. They had to get in and out in a couple minutes, and they screwed up, and it ended up costing them 30 years. So when he went back to the spaceship, that guy who was there for 30 years waiting for him. 30 years. I mean, that's a long time.
That's
and it was
the way Carl Sagan presented it when Allie, good to go, dropped into a place of timelessness in that geodesic dome. It was actually a face-center cubic hexagonal closed pack structure. It was a diamond shape in what is known as the Necker cube of space. And that's how Sagan presented contact with aliens outside of space-time. Now you're starting to get the rain in Spain.
Because I'm starting to understand that the time is a
way of storing memory. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah,
your brain is convoluted, so it's going to take a duration to go from here to there and back and again, and forming this little memory bite, which has a geometry structure. That geometry is a topological surface.
But when it comes to time, when it comes to the speed of light or singularity? If there's
That's a quantum universe. That's a quantum universe that uses space-time for its measurement. And the problem with space-time quantum mechanics is that it has an uncertainty principle. The more you know about one thing, the less you know about something else. And if you go into a holographic system, now you have access to resolutions of information, upward and downward, in scales that go beyond archetypal.
So in a hologram universe, you would have the big picture, and then you would have the micro.
And it's only about big. It's not about small. What I'm trying to say is it has its own doors that it opens, and then doors that are not available. Each model, that's a model. That's why they call it a holographic concept of reality. It's not a reality. It's one way of trying to encompass the concept of reality, like Descartes tried to separate the mind from the body. There's something more going on here. That's what I'm trying to talk to everybody about, to get the idea that there's some concept that we have not yet integrated into our overall meme scheme of memes. Memes are the way we store memory. Like, is that a physical thing or an emotional thing? You break it down in categories. That's what one of the Bibles was written about, the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of formation. It related sound, as I said before, when I was interested in the nature of sound, relates sound to words. How Babel becomes something more like the name of God. We don't know what this all means yet. It's all new physics and they're models. And as such, will have inconsistencies like all things do. And that's what I'm trying to do now, is understand better how to integrate my relationship of time and space with my higher self. And right now I'm doing some time travel experiments, and apparently others have begun to see that I'm doing something that apparently web bots can notice.
All right. Well, what I would suggest here at this point, I want to change space and time and have you pull your camera down a little bit, because all I'm seeing is your forehead.
Oh, sorry. You know what that is? I'm a dyslexic and I bob a lot when I talk. I don't drool anymore. I used to do that too.
Right. Well, I'm just letting you. That's fine.
I'll try to hold my space.
I'm just saying, for both of us out here watching, your brow of your eye is very interesting, I guess.
So talking about being a moving target.
Now, I would think a person who is comfortable in a finite physical universe would be very nervous and opposed to the things you're saying. But I would also... how did they used to fake it if they can't take a joke, But I also would say that if when somebody learns the principles of physics, for example, flying, if you don't do it right, it's not because you don't believe in falling will keep you from there. But on the other hand, your beliefs will actually move space-time. So if you're afraid of issues, you can actually bring those issues into being. Well, it's like your emotion. It's your emotion of the fear is actually a magnet to bring the stuff to you. Now, it's not to do that to punish you. I think is if you have a fear and you put that fear out there, the goal of the universe is to have you lose that fear. So you will attract to you situations where that fear exists so that you can work through it and work over it so it's no longer affects you. And
that's
if you don't...
exactly how health works, because I don't know anybody that has cancer that didn't start with anger. And so there is a metaphor there, and how your higher self communicates to you. That is the Jungian imaginal psychology, where illnesses are reflections of how your higher self is trying to communicate to you. And if you don't get the message, it will escalate until you do.
And if you use...
That's how you distinguish between flowing and being karma.
Right. And if you do manage to circumvent that illness via medicine, it will still happen again. This is why you have people who have cancer and they have reoccurring cancer. That means the mechanism for creating a cancer still exists. Not that you're
We
prone.
all of us have cancer in us. It's we make mistakes. And what you don't want it to do is magnetize. What I do, by the way, for cancer is I have a lot of humor, and I take polysaccharides, which puts more oxygen in my body. Cancer cannot exist in an oxygen-rich environment, which means that part of your nutrient includes the intake of oxygen, whether you're breathing it or you're eating it in a polysaccharide like a pharmaceutical mushroom. That's how you do it. And so you're always making mistakes.
I use H2. I use H2O2 for gargling my mouth, and I also will ingest some of it. That brings in O2.
What you can do is pray over the water first, and that'll even change it. I personally use that kind of water for vampires, but use a little holy water and squirt them on it and get some. I'm just kidding. But basically, the idea of intent in your mind's eye is actually what is, in fact, how psyche is brought into matter by the structure and memory in water. That is what I'm writing about right now on the how psyche is brought into matter using the structure of water. I might add another chapter in that same book is called Rock the Casimir, or Adventures in Time Travel. And it'll be on the Venditti concepts of capacitors in an open system. And I've just used the keywords for those people out there that will get that the concept is an all-around knot theory in the way a plasma bends into itself as a membrane. It's membrane physics is what it's going to turn out to be.
But with any kind of mechanical time travel, other than a spiritual or perhaps mental one, the problem I have is in a spaceship, when you go out into space, you have the problem of your body is not meant to be in space. So you surround yourself with a spaceship. It's got the atmosphere and the pressure and what have you. Now, when you're going to travel in time, you're actually going to be altering space-time, which you are created a part of. Your body is. So how do you travel and physically travel in time without having your hand go there and you stay here?
So what the Chinese have done is invented a new technology called super cavitation, where they are able to take a torpedo and move it through the water at Mach 2. How do they do that? They create an air bubble around the torpedo so that the torpedo is falling into air.
Right.
And the cavitation is the exclusion zone interface of topology between the water as a medium and the air as the different property that the torpedo is in. And that's how you get a larger cavitation ball to move a torpedo at Mach 2 in the water. And that's different than cavitation, but it's like the torpedo is falling in space when in fact it's inside the medium, and the space between water is the part where the torpedo exists. It's a metaphor.
All right, now, so if I was on that torpedo in that cavitation bubble, and I decided to stick my hand out into the water, it would be ripped off immediately, and I'd be thrown away. So,
well, that would be how the Challenger blew up. Yeah, that's the deal. They were trying to do an experiment. The information that I have indicated that the Challenger tried to do a cavitation ball like that, and that's what caused its demise. The only thing that survived that was a nematode, which probably led to Morgellons and some weird other creepy, what we call extremophiles that, blended with the nematode and created Morgellons or whatever. I don't know. What I do know is that is the technology now of how we use the teleportation laser out of Lockheed, for example, where there is no longer a need for encryption. You can teleport from one point to another, a ball of light or ball of information. And so it will be a new technology that is using, again, this whole concept of cavitation process.
Right now, I get the metaphor from the the Chinese torpedo, but we're still talking about that torpedo's still in the same space time, along with the ocean. We're talking about a physical thing. We're talking about leaving space time, and not. Let me give you an example. John Hutchinson, I'm sure you've heard of him. He did some experiments where he used sound and all kinds of energies with all this stuff he put together, real high transformers and so on, and he was able to liquefy bars of aluminum, and they'd jelly and they'd move around. It was all Super 8 film, so there wasn't no CGI and video things like that. It was guys there with a camera, right? And I asked him, I said, how do you think it did that? Because it wasn't hot, it wasn't melting. And he said he didn't know. He was just basically he's fiddling around. But if he had to take a guess, he would say that he was altering space-time. So part of that bar was moving between variations of space-time. Okay.
Well, that's the topology of into the out of.
All right. So if that's true, which it rang kind of good with me. If that's true,
well, that's why Roger Penrose has co-authored his work with Hameroff on the concepts of microtubule and the structure of water inside them, and how that sets up what we call a scalar representation, or block of the information, the way it's subcategorized. It's all about geometry. That's why Penrose called it the geometric universe.
All right, but I'm still looking at, let's just say for argument's sake that what he did was actually alter space-time, and that's why that thing moved and all that. Well, there's an example of what happens to a physical thing that's not protected in a bubble that's moving through space-time. Part of it did. And if that was a human being, their arm would have been wiggling and apart and stuff like this. And so that's why, even if you can physically alter space-time, you're going to be in something that's space-time going through space-time. And how do you have a membrane around you that isn't affected by that process?
That is what the Jungian imaginal James Hillman would have called sacred time. That's it's the moment, the now. That is where it's all happening. And we're just simply not able to grasp that in a conscious waking state. That's why dream time to the Hopi and the Aborigines is more real. It has more content. And as far as fear, I was going to say something about fear. That is what Castaneda called the first enemy of man. Shouldn't be afraid. The whole thing is, here for what purpose? Begat. That's, guy, trying to procreate and things. The different survival circuits are just part of the package. And there is a concert going on inside each of us. And that's what we need to learn how to listen to, the music. Blood music, that's an interesting book, sci-fi to read, where the blood becomes conscious and decides it wants to talk to God. That's interesting. The blood becomes conscious in blood music. And I'm not sure who wrote that. I think it might have been Greg Bear, but I'm not sure. Blood music. And it's where the blood becomes conscious, and then it decides that it wants to speak to God. How does that work?
Well, I get where you're going for it, but I don't think that itself is possible. Because
can you understand how nanotechnology is getting to the place where consciousness, according to Whitehead, is in an electron, because the electron knows when it's in a magnetic field and when it is not.
Yes, but this is the problem: is you have the consciousness of a liver does its job, but it can't go, hey, I want to watch a movie. You have a group of limited consciousness, and I'm saying humans are limited too. You have a limited consciousness working together to create a greater consciousness, that the synergy of the whole can experience the greater consciousness, but it can't be experienced by the parts because they're incapable of experiencing it because of the complex arrangement. You've created a new consciousness. For example, a city would have a type of consciousness based on the people in there.
It does.
But we can't experience that consciousness because we're unable to be that whole in ourselves.
Yes, the way your city of Chicago, the anthropologists called that cybernetic anthropology. That was Laughlin, the Aquila, and McManus, and they said that Chicago has a group consciousness that's quite unique and quite different than New York. Mm-hmm. Where the ghetto is laid out in your waterfront determines the consciousness of the city, the structure of the physical geography, and the way it evolved into sprawl has a type of consciousness. When I was in Chicago, I could tell where the Koreans lived, not, the neighborhoods.
Yeah, the language, the science kind of give it away. But
I mean, it was uniquely different than anything Seattle's ever dreamed of where I grew up. Chicago is I call it Chicago, but, just that's a different part of the barrios,
But I guess my whole point is that we are going to we as much as we may be infinite beings, we're finite beings to a point, and we have to unite with other beings to create that greater consciousness. Now, at the end of that could be God, okay, and we're all part of God. But I am not God, but I am a piece of God.
I think that the movie, what was it called, Mindstorm? Where they were tracking the consciousness of a woman that was dying, and they showed what she was seeing as she was dying, where there were these little dots going into a big swirl of millions and millions of dots. That what was that called? Mindstorm, or where they went into your dreams and things, and Dreamscape. It was Dreamscape, not Dreamscape. I forget which one it was. An older one. And what happened is the vision is that we are one part of something much larger in the length, girth, and width of what would be described as Homo sapiens. We are a composite, and we're unique, and that's why I'm going to suggest I think we've been invaded.
I'm looking at Mindstorm, and I have 2001. It doesn't sound like it. A psychic discovers dangerous cult where she investigates the disappearance of a senator's daughter. Wait a minute. I think I saw that movie.
Yeah, I bet you did. Yeah, imagine that. And that's my memory. And what I'm trying to tell you is there's something more going on here. And really, the upper brain, the one you associate with the mind, is there to make all your beliefs true. And
that's so funny.
True, I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't have believed it.
People come to you and say, like, we're trying to experience greater consciousness. Can you help us? And you go like, well, there's something else there. Now, there's something else to this. That's the answer. There's something else to this. I don't know, but I want
different for each of us.
I know. Well, I mean, that's the part. You're being very truthful, and yet that to somebody be like, what? Well, I want to know what that is. Well, you have to find that.
Well, that's exactly right. I can, and a teacher is only as good, can take you as far as they themselves have been. Mm. That's how that works. If you try to find the most impeccable teachers that you possibly can. I am actually a time traveler and have been to Mars. Just kidding. But I can tell you what's going on in Mars. I can tell you what's going to happen in the future, because it's like I have this resonance. It's a resonance of knowing.
But don't watch me now when I do this, because I have to. You're watching me push.
I don't know what you're doing. I was curious. It's like, was it a dancing gorilla, gorillagram, or what exactly?
I'm getting ready because we're getting close to the end of the show, and I turned off the automation.
I love about these things. I just hope you realize that every time I talk about these kinds of things, I'm speaking in metaphor. And it's important that you understand that. It's as if. That's a real good way. What is your metaphor? But to serve your paradox. So I have a paradox out in a meadow. I gotcha. And that's the way it works. Just like that. It made you grin. You got the big picture in a metaphor, and that's what made you smile. And that's it. That's it. Your mind's on. That is where it all happens.
Well,
so, to raise consciousness, you got to take responsibility for the thoughts you're choosing to entertain. Teach your children well. That is our single most important resource asset, not gross national product. It's our children. And the fact that we are rape, spindle, mutilating, Common Core, it's disgusting and embarrassing. And I've watched the United States go from number 6 in elementary education in the world to 26 in my lifetime. I'm embarrassed.
That's one thing about as you age, you have a wider span of observing. So, like I look at the sky and I see all these chemtrails. I remember when there was nothing in the sky. They still had planes flying. It wasn't like they didn't have planes.
Yeah, I bet a kid doesn't even know what a real cloud looks like. That's how weird it is.
Yeah, and they had planes back then. So why are the planes now, if it's not chemtrails, why are the planes now making all this stuff when they didn't back then?
Listen, they used the lithium as a lockdown in a city in Oregon just less than 3 months ago to see what would happen if the municipality soiled and they couldn't deliver water and everybody was in riot. And what they did is they went in with lithium in the aerosol, chemtrail. Everybody's sick, but they locked down. That was able to lock down a city. That is a new weapon of war for controlling the masses. Lithium in the air, nanoparticle. Doesn't even have to be breathed in. It's like falls through your clothing. Nanoparticle.
All right. Well, we did talk about that in one of our shows, but we have to go now. So I want to try and wind this down. Mention, I guess I'm putting up on there, the Dr. Richard Allen Miller Book Fund. People can donate, and the stuff he's got coming out, he's telling me about it. I'm telling you, we're doing a world of service by helping this man get his books out. And, of course, the ones that are already published and for sale, available on the website, richardallenmiller.com. And once again, Richard, I appreciate your time. I really do. And your insights and your fun and mind-stretching and mind-blowing and also an anchor into reality. So it's really, I really appreciate it.
Nice talking to you also. I like your bike. Your motorcycle scooter.
Yeah.
Take care.
All righty. We'll talk to you.